Today I want to talk about the games of Paul Morphy, the greatest player who ever lived, by far. Second is, I don't know, me, but first is Morphy. And if you look back at the games from the 1800s, generally you can find better games upstairs in the chess club, okay, between, you know, Preston and Grandmaster West, because those games are very suspicious. And that includes Wilhelm Steinitz, who was just terrible. Okay, I'm actually ashamed that he was a world champion. However, my shame lessens when I see the games of Paul Morphy. Morphy, I believe, was sent back in a time machine, and he was a strong grandmaster in his own time, and then he gave the beatdown to players of a previous era. So that was pretty awesome. Question.
What would you say his rating is today?
Very high, 2,900. Whatever Magnus's is plus 10. Okay. So Morphy was by far the greatest player who ever lived, and anybody else should be ashamed to even think they were better. And I've noticed this by looking at his games, and they're very instructive for players of your ilk, assuming you have an ilk, which is unlikely. Now, the reason his games are instructive, and the reason my games are instructive, is because, as I explained to many of my kids today in camp, most chess games are mismatches. One guy gives the other guy the beatdown. Then one guy plays sort of okay, and the other guy doesn't. So then you get to learn. If you look at the top games in the world with players like Kramnik and Carlsen, it's hard to explain why they lost. But when I beat players like you, it's easy. Every move you make is double question mark, and I make like average moves. So I'm up 7 pieces after a while. And teaching at chess camp, you see like some of the worst moves of all time. Okay, I thought you guys played bad, then I went to chess camp. In fact, I wrote down one of my chess camp games and put it on Facebook. If you saw, yeah, that was one of the, that was a top level game. Okay, anyway, these games are similar because Morphy played well and his opponents did not. Now, some of you may have been wondering, so for example, Ben Simon, okay, because it's all about us, may have noticed there's no white knight here. And that's because Morphy was so good, he was always spotting pieces. And for me, it's easier to spot a rook than a knight because I want my knight. I want my rook in the end game, but I don't want to play an end game down a rook or a knight. But in the middle game, you can use the knight to checkmate. Now, not only did Morphy spot this gentleman a knight, he was giving a simultaneous exhibition where he spot everybody material. Okay, just like you guys like to do. Okay, and this game started as a king's gambit. And you'll notice this game that white doesn't care much about material and black cares a lot about it. So, well, of course, if you're playing black in the king's gambit and your opponent is already spotting you a knight, it would behoove you to trade pieces and get a boring position, not let white sacrifice more and get a big attack where the missing knight doesn't really matter. In fact, Morphy's so good, he has the fact that his knight is missing to his advantage, as you'll notice later, getting out of the way of his other pieces. Okay, yeah, whenever I spot one of the kids a queen in my camp, I tell them they can't pin my knight to my queen, advantage me. Okay, so G5, which is a good move in a normal king's gambit, but I think if you're already up a piece, you shouldn't be making the game complicated. Okay, G4. Now the typical Muzio gambit has white castling here and sacrificing a piece. And Morphy played D4 and then castled. So this is a book position, except usually white has a knight here. And you'll notice that black's development is very suspicious. Black hasn't developed anything. And he decided to finally develop something and defend his f-pawn. And after knight c6, if you put this position on a computer engine, it says it's equal. So even down 2 pieces, white's already equalized the game. Also, if you put many of Morphy's games on computer engines, he always plays the right move from move 1 to the end, just like you guys do. Okay? And players in the 1800s, usually they were down 20 or 30 points by move 20 or 30. They wanted to keep consistent. But here, white made the only move to keep equality. Okay? And I don't think white sacrificed enough material yet. So who can find a strong sacrifice? Bishop f7, correct. Queen f4, less correct. Takes. Queen h5 check. Bishop takes f4. Now, with the missing knight on b1, white is ready to get his other rook into the game, finally. And they traded pieces. And you'll notice that white is 3 pieces down. Sort of like you guys, except he did it intentionally. Now, here white's threatening mate in 1. Who can raise their hand and tell me mate in 1? Grandmaster.
I am.
Yes.
Rook F7.
Rook F7 mate. And generally, many Morphy's opponents would have allowed that, but then I wouldn't show you the game. So he played knight to H6, stopping rook F7 mate. Rook to F1. Now, the one thing that you'll see in common in this lecture anyway, with Morphy's games, is Morphy, when he did attack, which was every game, he used all of his pieces, even the ones he spotted. It's hard to understand that. That was more, ethereal somehow. And here he's got his queen and 2 rooks attacking, and these 2 pieces, they're not defending so much. Again, rook F7 is a threat, queen E8. Now here I like to give pause and think for a while. In fact, I tell most of my private students they should think here for an hour and try to find the right move for white. When asked, but Mr. Finegold, why should I think for an hour? I remind them it's Grandmaster Finegold, and then I tell them I get paid by the hour, so that allays their fears. Okay, in this position, white only has 1 move to keep equality, computer equality, and most low-rated players suggest a worse move. Okay, that's why you're low-rated. You guys earn your low-rated. It's good. Otherwise, you'd be higher rated. What's the only good move here for white? Who can find this move? Not easy to find. Exactly, earning his lower-rated status. Very good. After queen to G5 check, black has 1 legal move, which I assume you analyzed a long time. Queen to G6. And now what was your plan? Now your queen has really nowhere to go that makes any sense. You could give your queen away. You could sacrifice all your rooks, but that's the problem with queen G5, is your opponent's obviously going to play queen G6 because they have no other legal move. And then you can't do anything. So Morphy, being better than Ken West, somehow, giving a simultaneous exhibition, played
Rook F3.
Rook F3 is incorrect because it hangs a queen to queen takes queen. Also earning his low-rated player keep. Very good. Morphy, seeing his queen was attacked, played queen H4. Now, white has a rather obvious threat, which is not easy to protect. And I don't know if black saw it or not, because I didn't ask him. I was too young at the time. And if black did see the threat, I'm actually not sure what he would do about it. The threat, of course, being queen F6 check, winning the knight on H6. Maybe black didn't care about that because black's up 3 pieces, so what's giving 1 back? So finally, black decided maybe he should develop a piece, and he played D6, getting his bishop out, and Morphy did indeed take the piece. And white has the rather obvious threat of rook F8 and checkmate. Now you'll notice, through defensive measures, this rook can defend F8 by simply moving the bishop, and black has many squares to move the bishop, but he chose D7 because it's not hanging there. And now white missed a very nice checkmate, the only mistake Morphy made in his whole chess career. Well, maybe he made more than one. I mean, he did lose games. This was the only mistake of the game. And if you put the game on Houdini or Ripka or Shredder or Fritz, et cetera, if you want me just to name your engine, then send money to me. Then I won't name the other 5. I'll just name yours. Here, white has made in 5 moves. Every move being check. But Morphy was giving a simultaneous exhibition, so he didn't do it. So what did he do? Or I'm sorry, what should he have done? Does anybody see the mate in 5 that Morphy missed to the simultaneous exhibition? Anyone? Bueller? Remember, every move is check. Very helpful. You.
Rook G4.
Rook G4 hangs the rook to bishop takes rook. Queen G5 would allow Queen G6. Now, by the way, you guys have a good point, though. If you play Queen G5 and black couldn't play Queen G6, then Queen G5 would be pretty strong. If only we could make the black queen move away from g6 with a check. Rook to f8. He played rook f3. In fact, he played the other rook to f3, and there's a typo in the game score, which I figured out. But queen to g5, boo. Rook to f8 check leads to checkmate. Checkmate's good because you win. I assume you're taking notes. Queen takes is forced. Queen check. Queen g6 is now illegal because the queens can't go to g6. Queen d5 check. Bam. If Morphy had done that, that would have been more impressive. However, the mate that he did do is cuter than this one. So, okay. And of course, I've been in chess camp a long time. This is what would happen in my camp. And then black would have played king takes queen or castled somehow. I don't know. Who knows what would have happened. Okay, so in this position, Morphy should have played rook f8, but he played rook f3. He actually played this rook to f3, but the game score is incorrect. Now, white is threatening rook g3 with advantage. So he didn't want to get mated, so he played knight to e7. Obviously, he wants to play knight to g6. Morphy, who's giving a simul, sees knight to g6 and plays h4. And after knight g6, he plays h5. He was ready for that. Well, the knight can't really move, because then rook g3 is good again. So he tried for some tricks, bishop to g4. And now white has a winning advantage. Even though he spotted a piece and sacrificed two pieces, winning one of them back, he now captures the knight. Now, black played very poorly. Now, if I can, as an aside, talk about Morphy. The main reason most of my colleagues are not Morphy fans is they believe, and they have some good argument, that Morphy's opponents were terrible. So for example, if I went back in a time machine and I was playing guys who were 13, 1400 strength, I'd look pretty good too. They'd say, oh, you're the greatest player ever. So they said because Morphy's opponents were so bad, he's no good. Now on the other hand, Morphy was playing blindfolded when he was 9, and he's doing simultaneous blindfold exhibitions. And if you look at his games with Houdini, every move he makes is perfect. So he's got to be pretty good. And Morphy has a common opponent with your favorite world champion, Wilhelm Steinitz, who is their very famous common opponent. No, actually, thanks for that answer, though. For those of you at home who didn't hear, the answer was Staunton. Staunton avoided Morphy and never played, or Steinitz, or both of them. Was it Steinitz, or was it Morphy? I think it was Morphy. So Staunton said, I'm not playing Morphy, and he ran away crying. Okay, that's what the kids in the chess camp told me. Staunton actually never played a game with Morphy, as far as I know, because he was afraid of him. The one person who played many, many, many games with them was Adolf Anderssen. And he played the famous Evergreen game, or one of those games. One of those silly games that's terrible. Okay, and Anderssen's score against Steinitz, surprisingly, for those of you in the audience, Anderssen had a plus score against Steinitz in over 20 games. So over 20 games, Anderssen had a plus score. He probably was as good as Steinitz with a plus score. You play somebody 20 games and get a plus score, and they're better than you. Unclear. When Morphy played Anderssen, it was the smackdown of all time. In fact, with the white pieces, it's something like 13-1 for Morphy. And with the black pieces, Morphy has a slight edge. So Morphy was like, I think, plus 14 in his life against Anderssen. Anderssen was plus 2 against Steinitz. So if Morphy was much better than somebody who was better than Steinitz, Morphy was pretty good. Okay, now of course, Lasker was actually good, unlike Steinitz, who was not good. Okay, and by the way, there's a nerd upstairs who you all know named Jacob. You probably know him at home. And they did a statistical analysis of blunders per 1,000 moves in the World Champions games. Steinitz had over 30. And let's see, per 1,000 moves, he had 30. That means every chess game he made 1 or 2 blunders. Not very good. And Lasker made 3. That's better than 30. Right? So Lasker was good. Steinitz very suspicious. If you want to see some really terrible games, in the live audience you can walk upstairs. If you're at home, you can look at your own games. Or you can look at Steinitz's games with a computer. Some of those, no, Morphy, that's just beautiful. Every move. Morphy's opponent's a little iffy. Now here, Morphy's opponent blundered, so we won't get to see the nice endgame technique. Morphy's opponent should have played bishop takes f3. Okay, and if you guys were giving us time, what would you do with white? And you were Morphy. G7. Now, let's pretend it's white's move. What would white do? This move is extra strong. It's highly recommended. If you were white, what would you play here? Ah. 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 Ah, it's terrible. Come on, I just ate. He's eating right now. The correct answer, as I'm sure Ken West knows, is queen f6. With unstoppable pawn takes rook equals anything mate. So white doesn't want that to happen. I mean, black doesn't want that to happen. So black has to play queen g6, takes, and then takes this some way. Let's do that for simplicity. And white is a pawn ahead in the endgame and threatening rook f7. So probably white should win. That's the correct variation if both sides played correctly. But that didn't happen because, well, no, Morphy played right. His opponent did not do that. So bishop takes rook is the correct move, and white should be a pawn up in an endgame, assuming they play well. But his opponent played h takes g6, and now white has mate in 3, which I'm sure you would see in a simultaneous. And if white doesn't play mate in 3, he's completely lost. Probably black didn't see the mate in 3, so he's like, yay, I'm winning. And then Morphy made him, he's like, don't. And then he sued the Simpsons later. Rook f8 is great. Takes, mate. And as black would have said after the game, I hate when that happens. So next time you think you're a good player, give a simultaneous exhibition spotting pieces on every board. Then we'll see how good you are. Okay? And I don't know how every game, you just play over Morphy's games. I have more, which we'll show later. Now what Morphy did, different than you, and different than his opponents, is he used all of his pieces, and when he calculated variations, he was right. Other people, horrible moves, and they use one piece, like in chess can, move it around a lot. Now, you may say to yourself, well, Grandmaster Finegold, showing the proper respect, you would say, well, why do those guys play so badly? Okay, why can't they play well? Well, the reason people play well now is they have the internet, they have chess tournaments, we have airplanes, we have cars, we have air conditioning, we have chess sets on tables, we have lighting for them. Okay, if you want to play a Grandmaster, you can take a bus for 10 minutes, and there's a Grandmaster, different Grandmaster every day. Okay, back then, if you wanted to play Grandmasters, you play some guy down the street and probably, hurt yourself getting there, at least you wouldn't get hit by a car. And then, if you hurt your foot, you die for sure. Terrible. Okay, live till you're 30 years old, then you're lucky. So back then, there weren't many good players. So my question is, how did Morphy get good? Why was he 25, 26, 2700 strength, and everybody else was 1200 strength? How did he do that?
Time machine.
How did he, exactly. Time machine is correct. Okay, now the second game in my master plan, or as some would say, Grandmaster plan, is again somebody else where Morphy has the black pieces. Now just in case my comer shows up, oh man, I don't know how to do it. How can board, oh there it is. It was the biggest thing I could look at. Okay, and once again, if I remember this game, and I don't, it was a King's Gambit. Yes, I remember. Okay, now when my opponents play the King's Gambit, which doesn't happen very often, I always play d5, and that's what Morphy did, because I learned from the best, one of them. Now in this position, everybody and their dog knows the Falkbeer counter gambit begins with what move? What does black do here? E4. Now I don't play E4 because even Ken West knows E4 is a book move. Okay, I play C6. And just as an aside, I played C6 against a player rated 1945 in round 6 of a chess tournament where I had 5 out of 5. I was not doing as well as I expected. And my opponent had 4.5 out of 5, who had just beaten 2 experts in a row. He was on fire. And here he made the losing move. Well, there's 2 pawns you can take.
The C pawn.
The C pawn is not the best move, but it's better than taking the E pawn. My opponent took the E pawn, after which he could resign, although he did not. And I played the winning move. Queen check, that's the winning move. Now if G3, Queen E4 check wins, which is what happened, and then I win the rook. If you play the worst King E2, then I go check, you make the only legal move, check, you should play D4 but you don't, check. If King F3, I can win your queen. And if you play King H4, I have mate in 1, which I'm sure Ken West will see immediately. Incorrect. I'm waiting for Bishop F2 so I can say wrong. Even grandmasters can't see mate in 1.
Bishop E7.
Right, Bishop F2, I play G3. Right, Bishop E7 mate with advantage. Okay, so this proves I'm better than Morphy. No. So instead of C6, which is what I play, Morphy played E4, which was the style at the time, the Falkbeer counter gambit. Knight C3, Knight F6, D3, Bishop to B4. And as I said, if you were here earlier, and you weren't, Morphy develops all of his pieces when he attacks. And he doesn't use one piece, he uses all of his pieces. White didn't want to be pinned, so he played Bishop to D2. But Morphy was quite insistent he be pinned. So what did he play? You have to insist your opponent's pinned. That's my recollection of the game, but I haven't seen this game in like 80 years. Yay, I remember correctly. E3, Bishop takes, and castle. Now, this knight is pinned, and rook E8 is coming to pin the other bishop. So Morphy gives 2 pawns away, but he has a lead in development, and the white piece that is developed is pinned. The other white piece that's developed will be pinned shortly. And also, Morphy can win one of his pawns back at his leisure, and Morphy's bishop on C8 is ready to go also. Bishop D2, unpinning again. Bishop takes C3, and rook E8 check. Bishop E2, bishop to G4. If knight F3, I could take it, and white would have an interesting pawn structure. Very interesting. C4, defending his pawn at D5, and white has 2 extra pawns, but black's king is here, and white's king is there. And when you're playing Morphy, that's not good, because Morphy would attack mercilessly. C6, opening up the center. If I was white, I would let black play C takes D5, and I would try to get my king out of E1. But that's not what they did back in the 1800s. They took everything, then they resigned. Takes, knight takes, helping Morphy develop. These are the kind of players that gave Morphy a bad reputation. They were like, man, look at these guys you're beating up on. They're terrible, developing your pieces for you. Okay, but they didn't know any better. All they knew was, I'm ahead material, hooray. But as you can see, black has more minor pieces out. Black's rook is opposite white's king. Black's king is very safe, and white's is not. White's is terrible. King F1, unpinning. Now the typical player here, you guys are typical, you would miss like white's threatening bishop takes bishop because it's no longer pinned. And if somehow you saw that, you would trade bishops. But Morphy likes to keep his opponent pinned. So what brilliant move did Morphy play? Always keep him pinned. Anyone? Bueller? What's that? What are you saying, that he has 2 knights?
You know what I'm saying? What movie we play probably.
Well, again, the white's threatening bishop to take his bishop, winning a piece. Because the bishop's no longer pinned. If you see Morphy games, you see this move a lot. Not sure how. I never played this move. Very good. Rook takes bishop. And after takes, that knight is somewhat pinned. And also it's a different pin. All the guys' knights are pinned. Now your move, knight to D4. Now White's very unhappy. If he was a better player, probably wasn't too unhappy yet. Queen B1, as was the style at the time, to play the worst defensive move. Bishop takes. If king F2, the knight G4 check. Therefore, king F2. Knight G4 check. Then back to G1. Now, most of you guys, like Ken West, for example, would say, indeed, I have 2 pieces for a rook. So Ken West would play B6, saving his B7 pawn, then H6, getting luffed. Then he'd play rook C8, and when asked why, would say it's an open file, and so forth. Morphy instead checkmated his opponent. That was a better idea. So he played knight F3 check, as Ken West suggested. White has 1 legal move, so he played it. Queen D4 check. This is a clearance of a square. Black wanted to play queen D4 check, but there was a knight there, his own knight. So he moved it out of the way. King G2, queen F2 check. White's king's pretty safe, right? King H3, queen F3 check, king H4, knight H6. Again, clearance. He wants to play queen G4 mate, but there was a knight there. Okay, now who wants to stop queen G4 mate? Rook G1, did he resign? Queen G1. Knight F5 check, queen H5 mate with advantage. Right, and we don't see games like this now unless you come to our chess camp. Then you'll see, well, then black would have played queen G3 the last move, and HG, and I don't know. Yeah, notice how, again, black has all of his pieces attacking, and white didn't move either one of his rooks. He moved his king a lot. It's pretty good moving his king. I have to give him that. Okay, and then Morphy played a game with Napoleon, but not the Napoleon, a Napoleon. Okay, some guy whose name happened to be Napoleon. Okay, and when he played chess, it was very complex. Bam. Nothing. Yeah, terrible. Okay, so Morphy's black. By the way, when Morphy was white, this is unusual. Nowadays, if you go to the super duper GM tournaments, white's scoring very well. And in the 1800s, white was also scoring well because white was sacking all his pieces and then mating black, and black's like, oh, well, I got mated. Morphy was no exception. Morphy won all his games with both colors, but especially with white. With white, you know, he was scoring in the 90% plus tax. With black, only about 75%. Terrible. Yeah, in fact, all the games in my database of Morphy, he scored 80%. Most of them were simul's and rook odds and queen odds and blindfold. What's that?
Odd simul.
Yeah, odds, simul's. You know, he couldn't play you straight up because you'd be minus 30 on move 1. Okay, you know, I walk around, I see the king and queen set up wrong. Those are the kind of guys he was playing. Okay, so here Morphy has the black pieces. And just like at my chess camp, E4, E5. That's all they know. I give quizzes at my camp. I say, like, who was the first world champion? And they go, Kasparov. Okay. And I ask the kids, what's the worst first move for white? Which is actually a good question for this class. This is the right rating level for that question. Now, there's a grandmaster you've never heard of, unless you're Spencer, and his name is Mikhail Gurevich, not Dmitry Gurevich. Boo. Ken West was like, his head was all over the place. Like, yeah, oh, Dmitry. Okay, Mikhail Gurevich is actually a very sad story in the chess world. Now, Mikhail Gurevich beat everybody. He was winning all his games, and he was the 3rd highest rated player in the world. And in 1990, he played in the Interzonal in Manila. And with 2 rounds to go, he was in clear first. And the top 8 players go to the candidates matches. So he was all set to lose to Kasparov for the world championship. He was ready to do it. And with 2 rounds to go, he played Nigel Short and Vishy Anand and lost both. Tied for a place, but lost on tiebreak. Didn't come in the top 8. Didn't go to the candidates match. And that was the end of him. Then that's why you haven't heard of him. After that, something happened to him. Like, he didn't like losing his last 2 and not qualifying. And then his rating went like that. And that's it. Like, he didn't do anything after that. Before that, though, for a 2 or 3 year period, he won every tournament, and he was 3rd rated in the world. Then after that one setback of losing 2 in a row, he just needed a draw to qualify. That was the end of him. And the same thing happened to Andrei Sokolov, who you also haven't heard of. Andrei Sokolov was also the 3rd best player in the world. And then he played a match with Kevin Spraggett, who you also haven't heard of. He was the best player in Canada. And they had a candidates tournament in Canada, and they said, okay, Canada, you get one player. And they're like, Spraggett. And they're like, okay, you beat up on Spraggett to Sokolov. Sokolov drew the match somehow, and in the playoffs, Spraggett beat him. So Spraggett won a candidates match, even though he was not top 100 in the world. And then the next round, he lost the candidates match. And that was the end of Sokolov. And Sokolov's like my rating now. But he was third best player in the world. And then, so psychologically, sometimes you get, you know. Now, in this class where I said, what's the worst first move? The reason I asked that was, Mikhail Gurevich and I had a discussion about this once. And he believed, I don't know if he still believes it, he really did believe it too, he wasn't kidding. He believed White could make a losing move on move one where his position would be lost, theoretically lost, that he would evaluate it as lost. So what is the worst first move? That would be my answer, although I'd be kidding, but yeah. A3, and White's better. No, the answer is H4. H4 is the worst move you can make. And well, everybody would, any grandmaster would agree to that. And anyway, when I asked this question in my chess camp, one kid raised his hand and said, knight F3. That's the worst. And then it happened to be siblings, and the siblings said, that's what dad plays. So I guess whatever their dad plays, that's the worst. That's terrible. Okay, later in the camp, that person played knight F3 on move one. So they weren't too sure, you know, they were sort of guessing. Okay, but in my camp, E4, E5, that's what kids do, because that's what they're taught, I guess. I don't know. Okay, knight F3, knight C6. It's like a game played today. Bishop C4. Bishop C4 is not common today in the top level. At chess camp level, it's forced. There's no, otherwise, what are you doing? Okay, bishop C4, bishop C5. In the chess camp, the games go knight F6, knight G5, queen E7, and then I go out and cry. See? I don't want to see what happens after that. Okay, so bishop C5. Now, there is a chess coach in Chicago. Actually, I don't know who it is. I was just told this story. And he tells his students to play knight G5 here. Not the best move. And his students do, because he's the coach. And after queen takes G5, which is usually played, he tells his students to play D4. And about half the time, about half, the kids take on D4, and his students play bishop takes queen. So that's why he tells his students to do that. They win the queen about half the time. It's good odds. And when they don't win the queen, sometimes they win anyway, because, you know, only a piece. So very suspicious strategy that wouldn't work at the top level, although it would work in some levels. Okay, so Morphy's opponent played B4. And any, you know, fifth grader knows this is called Evans Gambit, named after Captain William Evans. He was a ship captain, right? He was a real captain. Yeah. Yeah. In the Navy, maybe. I don't know. Not named after Larry Evans, who said you should never sacrifice. So very funny. It's called the Evans Gambit. Okay. Now, you can take on B4, or you can play bishop B6. If you want to play bishop to B6, there's a very nice game for the 2006 U.S. Championship where black won in style. But bishop takes B4 was the style at the time, and still is. And this is normal even today. To look at a modern game where this was played between actually good players, there was a game Kasparov Anand. And if I remember correctly, and I don't, Anand played bishop E7, and Kasparov won very convincingly. Although bishop E7 is played today. There's also a game between Ray Robson and Eugene Perelstein. Ray Robson living in St. Louis recently. And Ray won in 17 moves, I believe, when Perelstein hung a piece, like a whole piece. He's like, wait, my piece is gone. Okay, so this is the main stuff. E5, I don't believe, is a move. Luckily, Spencer is here. They castle here, right?
Yeah, E5 is the last one.
Yeah, so, okay, castles is the normal move, because you castle in chess. But Morphy was black, not white, so E5, very suspicious. The keen observer in the audience will notice that knight F6 is now very risky. So that's why he played E5. Okay, D5, Morphy always plays active. Now, again, in my chess camp, in the game in question, if you can imagine there was a black pawn here, when black played d5, white took the other pawn en passant. Okay, which I said you can't do that. That was the same game as the castling. Okay, but these guys are better, so they actually know the en passant rule. And queen takes. And again, even when Morphy's black, he's always ahead in development. The 3 pieces out to 2, and Morphy's ahead by pawn. Hooray! Although I guess it's 2 pawns, but I can't count. Castles, knight to e7. And white's trying to attack, but because white sacrificed some pawns, but white's pieces are all in the back rank, so that's not good attacking. Knight to g5, threatening f7. When your opponent plays knight to g5 in a double king pawn opening, what's always the right response for black, if legal? If legal. h6 exclam, although not for black. See, black wants to play knight takes f7. That's why he played knight g5. Castle. If you can castle, you should castle. Can you castle? Yeah, so they castled. And if you can't castle, then sometimes you get into trouble. Okay, and yeah, white's playing very suspiciously. Bishop to d3, moving the same piece again, instead of developing his queen side, threatening the lowly h-pawn. Now, how could you defend your h-pawn and complete your development? People are like, complete my development. I'm not doing that. Get your pieces out. Bishop to f5. So black is 2 pawns ahead, and black has all of his minor pieces out, and white has half of them out. That's why Morphy was good, and we've never heard of his opponents, because Morphy always won and they always lost. Okay, that's why I think he was quite a good player. Morphy, like players today, get their pieces out in castle. His opponents, not so much. And you know, they couldn't go on chess.com and do 100 puzzles a day because they didn't have chess.com for some reason. Okay, okay, so they trade. And now white plays a skewer, your favorite tactic. You're mixing your metaphors there. Now, normally I would be kidding, and I'm not kidding now. I'll be back to kidding in a second. The government just approved glasses for, I'm not kidding, happened like yesterday. No, you don't know? For dyslexia. I'm not kidding. Go there and look it up. I'm not kidding. So that bishop h6 was very dyslexic of you. Thank you. Okay, so he's h6 and a3 are the same to him. I don't know. Okay, so white's winning material, but black keeps developing. Queen g6, white takes the rook, black takes the knight. Now your bishop is hanging, so he saved his bishop. And black said, yummy, yummy, yummy. Now, in this position, white has a rook for a knight, and black has how many pawns? Well, black has 7 pawns, and white has 4 pawns.
Where did you get those glasses?
Yeah. So black has 3 pawns and a knight for a rook. Without looking at the position, what's usually better? A knight and 3 pawns or a rook? Knight and 3 pawns. So black actually has a material advantage. Black has more development. And in my personal opinion, these are not easy to get out. I don't know where those are going. So not good for white. Bishop c1, completing the undevelopment, setting up for the next game. A brilliant strategy. That way if they play again, he's all ready to go. Doesn't have to waste any energy. Now this is the kind of move I see in the chess camp a lot. It's a move that makes no sense, but it attacks something. And it works about half the time. So usually black would play like h6 and white would take the queen. So then it worked out. Okay, but queen to g6. Bishop to f4. So white's trying every square out for size and decides f4 is good. Rook to d8. As I've talked about in the lecture several times, Morphy always used all of his pieces. The rook on a8 wasn't playing, so let's put it in the center. Queen c2, saving his queen. Also walking into another attack, as Morphy's opponents often did. Knight to d4. And queen to e4 centralization. Now, Morphy made a move that's so good, it will cause an even wider mouth of guffaw than we normally see with Ken West. Black to play and win. He makes a move that wins instantly. And you might say, well, Grandmaster Finegold, how do I know when I'm winning instantly? Well, first of all, you're never, okay, when all your pieces are out and all your opponent's pieces haven't moved yet, you should be winning. It's only fair. Now you'll notice, of the pieces that white does have out, this queen and this queen are on the same diagonal. So every knight move from f5 is a discovered attack. Knight anywhere is a discovered attack. It turns out black can threaten checkmate and threaten the queen. Although it's only checkmate because the queen's not there. That's why it's not easy to see. So who can find the winning knight move? It's a knight move from f5. I still expect other pieces to be suggested. What's that? Knight h4. Then I would play queen takes queen, and the knight doesn't have anything good to do.
You played this move during a blindfold simul.
Yeah, this was a blindfold simul?
Yeah.
That's what you guys do a lot. Knight to g3, very good. Now you'll notice white's queen is under slight attack by everything. The knight on h4, g3, the queen on g6. So white has to do something about that. Unfortunately, black's also threatening knight on d to e2, which is very good for black. Very good. And you can't do anything about both of them except cry a lot. I guess one chance, which wouldn't have worked, is rook to e1, defending everything, and then new variation. And then I could go check, and then you would take, and I would take, and you would take, and then I would mate you. I hate when that, well, I like when I'm black and that happens. Knight takes queen's no good. Oh yeah, knight takes queen's pretty good too. Okay, so white played queen takes queen. And which way did black recapture, Ken? Correct, he did not. He played knight e2 mate with advantage. Right. Ken West ain't falling for that. He's not Grandmaster for nothing. Why is he? Oh. And so those are examples of Morphy not only winning when giving simultaneouses, when giving peace odds, when doing both, when doing blindfold simultaneouses, but also, more importantly, he used all of his pieces. And of course, it's harder to find examples of these checkmates and winning attacks today because, as my colleague grandmasters would tell me, people defend better now. You can't just mate them, they stop you. But back in the 1800s, they didn't stop you as much. All right, you can mate me. Yeah, I got mated. I've been mated before. And that's why if you go to the chess camp I teach at, in fact, I'm teaching one here at the chess club next week, you'll see a lot like this. One guy just lets you take all his pieces and mate you. So you see that a lot. You learn the power of development. These pieces never moved, and this piece did a bishop's tour of the board. Bishop a3 to f8 to a3 to c1 to f4.